Raptor Recovery Center. This is one of several wildlife rehab enclosures that we have here at Sonoma County Wildlife Rescue. This one is a series of mews specifically designed to help the healing and strength training of our raptors that come through. So I'm just going to show you guys some of the features of this area, and we'll also show you and talk about one particular patient who happens to be amongst the handful that are recuperating here right now. Welcome. This is the hospital area within the Raptor Recovery Center. So because raptors often need a quiet, low-stress environment, we have this separate hospital area for those birds. Now, luckily at the moment, although we have a handful of birds that are in our regular mews, we don't have anyone needing intense care just yet. And so my loud voice, where we hear with animals, would have to be toned down. But because it is just us, let me show you. We have both our traditional stainless steel, easy to disinfect enclosures for when animals need that very confined healing space. Because raptors are prone to injuring themselves or fraying their feathers on things, even as simple as one side with that cage, we do have these soft-sided enclosures, which will help with that feature. And we even have our larger soft-sided for the bigger animals when we have an eagle or something that needs that really tight hospitalized care. As they heal up, they head out into the mews and eventually to our bigger areas as they gain more strength. So let me tell you about one animal that's with us right now. There's a red-tailed hawk that was found by a Good Samaritan named the event in Petaluma that was stuck on a barbed wire fence. When she brought the hawk in, literally there was part of the fence adhered to the bird's wing. The flesh was wrapped around the barbs. And so it did have to be surgically kind of cut out. Now, when you have a wound, there's a number of different features that will all impact how well that wound heals. You have the depth of the wound. And in this case, it took a chunk of flesh out of one side of the wing, but the skin on the other side was still intact. So that was good. Another feature you have is the size of the wound. And this one was about silver dollar size, which for this bird's wing was significant. It was kind of medium. Another feature is the shape of the wound. And in this case, it was round, which is not great because then there's going to be a lot of tension as you try to close across the tall aspects of the defect. Another feature is going to be the location of the wound. And this was on the stretchy part of the wing, which is really tough because it's a high mobility area. And with this bird, it's a tough tightrope walk between keeping it confined to allow that tissue to heal and not letting it get too stressed out. And so I sutured the wound closed on the first day, and we started on antibiotics and some other care. But it was starting to get really stressed in these little enclosures. So we did have to move it out front so it didn't have just adverse outcome from consequence of stress alone. But that means that wound started to tear open. So we had to go back and forth a little bit. But now that wound is closed, and this bird is out in one of our mews, gaining its flight strength back again. So I'm going to go head on out and grab our hawk. Right, so now I have our patient in hand. This is the red-tailed hawk. You can see the characteristic tail that we see on most of the adults in our area. And so the wing that had the defect in it was his left wing right here. And you can see there's just a few teeny tiny little scabs left to heal. So there was a defect that big, a chunk that big missing from the flesh of that bird. And with appropriate bandage care. Now, when he's in his wing wrap, we can't leave him like that for long term. We can't leave him like that for a couple weeks so it's going to heal, or he'll get too atrophied, there'll be too much fibrous connection. So he does need physical therapy regularly, even during that time. Now, he's doing great, he's past that point, but whenever we do manipulate a bird's wing, we always do it at the joint. We're not going to pull on the end of the feathers, but here at the wrist, we can see the full extent, and here at the elbow, you can also see the full extent of this bird's wingspan. And so he's doing great. Now you notice he has a hood on. Once the bird is in hand, if they have that decreased stimulation of the hood, they're much calmer, much easier to handle. You can see I have just my regular exam gloves on right now, but when I first went to grab them, safety first, I had our big leather gloves, just a couple gloves and a towel is all we needed in this controlled environment to capture this guy. And so overall, he's doing well. His muscle mass is doing good. He's got a nice bit of quail or mouse in that crop. And so he's in this mew, which is our mid-size area. And so this allows him to increase his strength, get some more flight capacity back before he goes to the larger area as he heads towards release itself. Now he still has a couple other wounds that are healing, so we're keeping an eye on the smaller issues, make sure that they don't get complicated and there isn't something else going on. But so far, this little fellow is doing just fine. All right, there you go, sir. Indeed. Well done. So welcome, we're just in the mew next door to the one where our healing barbed wire hawk is. And so the mew, M-E-W, is the term for a raptor enclosure. I just wanted to show you guys some of the features of the mew where we don't have a bird in here right now to stress out a lot of talking and showing. And so you can see we do have a number of different perches. All these perches can be adjusted in terms of the diameter, to adjust it for the talon size of the patient that's in here. We have easily cleanable, replaceable surfaces on there. All the windows, we want them to get ventilation, but we don't want them to get stressed, so they have the slatting windows, which allows that full exposure to the outside world, but keeps them nice and calm during their healing process. We also have these feeding stations, so when we do present the food to the raptors, and unless we have to do a special capacity testing, it's all frozen thawed. Mice or small or quail, as the species dictates, we will feed them on these feeding stations. You'll notice we're on pebble-type gravel. This is very easy to clean, and especially in this nice wet time of year, it stays nice and dry, so we're able to keep a controlled environment for these patients as they heal. Now, if we have a mammal, we don't usually use the substrate, but for the birds, it works very well. And you'll notice we have all these doors. And so just through this wall right here is where that healing barbed wire hawk is. But what this lets us do is, as an animal gains in fight capacity, we can just expand it so it has access not to just one mew, but 2 or 3, so that it can get strength gradually as it's ready for a larger and larger area. And if you want to test that strength, one thing we do have within this building is our hallway, which is used if we want to test the long, quiet capacity of a bird.